Hi everyone, I'm Becky Carr and welcome to this month's webinar. And it's on strengthening your organisation using talent management assessments. Firstly, before we get started, I'd like to add the word clever to the phrase management assessments, as I know there are some really very average type assessments out there too. As a consultant, I also see them and quite often. So secondly, this webinar is aimed at both those people that and organisations, I guess, who already use talent management assessments like, Finks and Extended Disc, as well as those organisations who are listening and are thinking about using them, but not yet quite made that jump. Lastly, I just want to make sure that, look, I understand talent management. It's a huge topic, and I'm not going to try and cover it all in the next 30 minutes in this webinar, but we will scratch the surface a little bit in some of the specific areas. But today I'll be mainly focusing on the acquisition of talent management. And look, you can see there's onboarding, development, performance management, succession planning, workforce planning, etc. Be assured, assessments are used for all the different aspects of talent. I can't even say it today, for talent management cycle. As you can see here, understanding how to onboard and keep newly selected candidates engaged and motivated is really essential for retention, especially in the first 3 to 4 months. We all know this. But of course, engagement is an ongoing aspect, as is development of the candidates for growth of the, for the person themselves and the organisation. Development and performance management assessments should be entrenched really as part of any organisational culture and strategy as well. It's really interesting, as over the last 6 months, I've been really honing in with my clients about succession planning. And it's no surprise that many critical positions in organisations have no transparent succession plan in place, which is pretty scary. There are so many reasons to make this part of the organisation's strategy. I won't go into it today, but it is a vital piece of the puzzle, along with, say, workforce planning. Personally, I use assessments in one way or another in all of these areas. The data helps me give, a real deep dive or understand best fit, support, which is so important, growth and alignment to the goals of the organisation, and using them in all of these areas. Okay, so regarding talent acquisition, usually the first stage, companies today tend to invest enormous amounts of money and so much time and other resources in advertising and recruiting strategies to attract their ideal candidates. Thankfully, a growing portion of these organisations also use talent assessments to identify, recruit, and select the best candidates. The results, of course, increased productivity, obvious bottom line savings, and decreased turnover, among a myriad of other things, including increased engagement and culture. So given the many benefits of talent assessments, why do so many organisations neglect to use well-recognised data-driven support systems when hiring employees? It never ceases to amaze me. I hardly need to add, as you already know, a wrong engagement can be very expensive. It adds frustration and angst. It upsets both parties and might have been avoided with a little bit more professional help. And that's what this webinar is really about. I think I've lost count recently of the amount of managers doing their own recruitment, and that's okay, but flying completely blind and hiring what they feel is right. And unfortunately, a vast majority actually has not turned out to fit that well, or each of the parties' expectations have been way off from each other. But a bit more on that soon. Let's just go back and have a quick look at what a professional talent assessment actually is. Simply, it's a proven and well-supported, reliable tool that, in this case, recruiters, managers, consultants, and business organisations in general can use to help evaluate candidates. Of course, as I said before, evaluation does not have to be just at the acquisition stage. Evaluating is needed throughout the development and growth of a person in the organisation, but we're just going to more centre on the acquisition for now. Basically, the assessments are added support as to help guide which candidates might be the best fit for a position and which might not. You know, formal talent assessments add a very clever, professional and additional deeper view to help evaluate a candidate or employee over a range of disciplines. You know, some like behavioural or personality assessments give guidance over aspects like potential leadership, behavioural preferences, personal motivators and demotivators, the team fit, support, or, you know, their avoidance areas, so important, and what they might be like under pressure. Maybe their ideal management needs and possible their development areas as well. On the other side, other good or clever talent assessments can compare an individual with benchmarks and help highlight critical differences that can't always be picked up face to face through verbal questions and answers in the interview. So a good example of this is the aptitude assessment. An aptitude assessment test, or I really call them aptitude tests, can be an effective tool for predicting job performance. An employment aptitude test measures a person's cognitive ability, including how the participant thinks, reasons, and solve problems. The tests evaluate how well a person might apply reasoning skills to reading comprehension, or working with numbers, or finding solutions to problems, and often things like abstract thinking too, along with the ability to learn and use new information. I'll talk a little bit further down the track on these and have a look at the Finks ones as well, the Finks aptitude tests. But before we get into too much detail, let's look at talent acquisition from a recruiter's or an organisation's needs or point of view. And you'll quickly see that the same 4 issues keep coming up again and again. And I see this over and over myself. Here they are. So no matter the organisation, literally it's the same 4 issues that arise again and again. And the fact is getting the right fit, especially for the critical positions. Number 2, sourcing people who are more likely to succeed in well-defined specific positions. 3, it's a no-brainer, reducing turnover. Every one of us knows hiring the right person takes considerable focus and energy, but moving people on uses so much more. Getting it right is pretty critical. And the 4th big key point here is finding people who do not only fit the role, but are already or are potential leaders, especially in mission critical roles. So for succession planning, you know, once on board, excellent induction, you know, wise development, performance management, etc., all play their part. But why do so many businesses still rely on non-professional, sometimes hit and miss strategies to find that right person? Time and time again, we all come across organisations who made their decisions on it just feels so right at the time type recruitment. Now, it just felt right recruitment approach does sometimes get it right. And that's the problem, I guess. If it works once or twice, why should it work again? Why shouldn't it work again, I should say? You know, it's faster, it's possibly initially cheaper, and I can assess people really well is a statement that I definitely hear myself. But given the development of professional talent management reports today, is it really worth the risk? And apart from the possible danger of having a team all filled with like-minded people, similar people to the interviewer, I mean, which happens a lot, there's plenty of research to point out that getting the right appointment through data-driven assessments result in significant productivity increases, cost savings, and decreased attrition. We need to take a closer look at what more, I guess, a sophisticated, or what I call a clever talent management assessment offers. And I understand there's so many of them out there, but some really good, clever ones will have specific key points. So today's more sophisticated talent management assessments they certainly offer greater depth and more accuracy than ever before, and it's getting better and better. Unsupervised online test reports are today not only the norm, they are becoming harder to trick and cheat, plus they extend the footprint of possible global candidates as well. I've seen many aptitude or cognitive tests take place recently on live or recorded camera to make sure there is no cheating as well. And that seems to be another norm that's coming through. Clever assessments can easily gather data on a multitude of issues to support that final face-to-face interview. So for example, as already mentioned, things like, behavioral preferences, team fit, accuracy, numeracy, reasoning, leadership, etc. It's just too expensive to get it wrong these days. Assessments like extended DISC, Fink's sales competency reports, or the aptitude reasoning test cut that risk down. However, that said, it's worth reiterating that a talent support tool like an assessment is exactly that, a device to give you added depth and meaning to what will ultimately be a face-to-face interview or more. So even a great tool doesn't set out to replace the final interviews or interviewing in itself, and neither should it. It's a really vital part. So back to the old question as to why there is still some resistance out there to use talent assessments, especially in acquisition stage, like identifying and selection, that resistance tends to come from some of these key areas. We've got away with it so far, is what I hear. Maybe we can save some upfront costs. Yep, true. It could get more expensive in the long run. Or what I hear is, this is not an important role, let's risk it. I've got a client at the moment who's regretting saying that because it's cost them a lot. Or we'll just find someone like Mary's personality. She just left. She was bubbly and upbeat. Let's just do that again. Gosh, we'll never mind about the fundamental way that Mary operated or preferred to work. Let's just get a character back like Mary. That's the point. There are so many differences in how someone presents as well, how they come across to others. Get it wrong and that organisation is up for some really big costs and low productivity. Get it wrong and that recruitment company manager or consultant gets a strike in their reputation as well. I've just had a client where the manager has hired 5 people and let 4 go over or within a 2-year period. The 5th just handed their notice in after 6 months. Needless to say, that position and all the projects associated with that position are still on ground zero. The manager himself is exhausted and he is doing, he's doing the onboarding each time. So there's been no analysing of the position, no assessments used for the recruitment, but they want to save money. I feel a bit astounded when I come in to see that. And I understand, recruitment is not cheap upfront, but it definitely, if you work out what these people have poured out over the last 2 years and the non-productivity during that time, it's quite scary. And there's another reason some organisations don't use clever talent assessments, and that is actually the lack of coaching and training to administer and understand the very reports that are there to support them. A good professional assessment will always have ongoing support, training available, telephone support, and explanations and help readily available for the users. Just think about the interviews you've been involved with. If you have, most times we're digging for the real issues behind the answers. A clever talent management report can cut through to vital, deeper aspects. So for example, when I use extended DISC reports, they come with their suggested question lines at the back, or if you've moved them to the front, wherever, that help hone into the critical issues of how that person might be feeling towards aspects of their environment at that current time. I absolutely love those, and I really like to use them in recruitment and development, but they are really good at understanding how that person is adjusting and the feelings that are attached with it. This is important stuff before you recruit someone. So in fact, here's what organisations who do use talent management assessments say to themselves, I should say. So in surveys with many positional critical recruitment companies and consultants and managers, here's a summary of 9 of the findings. Choosing the right proven and trusted talent management tool is more critical than ever. We tend to stay with it once we trust it and are entrained in it. So they look hard and they research hard. The degree of ongoing quality, testing, constant upgrading, the ease of use and the clarity of data tends to separate out which tools we use and which are too open to dangerous interpretation and bias. Number 3, some advertised wonder reports do not have the depth of experience nor rigor to stand up to scrutiny. Using the right reports with deeper and proven experience is really essential. Number 4, now that online is booming, unsupervised testing tends to be the norm. Reports that use blind questions, interactive algorithms, and are constantly being peer reviewed are what is preferred, as they can't pre-cheat. Number 5, being online is critical. Some paper-based self-administered reports are still very shallow, generating little more than fun snapshots of likely personality, which, to be honest, they could guess at anyway. We need more. We need motivators, demotivators, how a person likes to be managed, their team fit, communication, leadership potential, let alone on top of that, the obvious experience and skills to do the actual job. So number 6, recruiting excellent candidates is a busy practice. We don't have time to sift through long paragraphs and interpret strings of bias, especially those that are neutrally worded, leaving the interpretations far too bland and general. We need reports that are succinct and reliable. The software and organization behind the assessment is actually really critical, along with the training and support. Number 7, English is more and more the second language as globalization increases. Not only is online testing a must, tests must be able to be conducted in almost any native language, but then the report in English is to be clear and concise. If it needs to be tuned into English, there's many reports that don't need to be. So if it does, it needs to have good clarity. Number 8, reports must help us sell the how to avoid comfort syndrome. Less experienced managers frequently source and select candidates that are very similar or like-minded to themselves and they feel comfortable with, not necessarily looking at the best fit for the position. Number 9, benchmarking. Benchmarking is more and more critical, yet it can be elusive to determine why a particular existing team member is so successful. Clever talent management reports dig below the surface and obvious issues to deeper motivations, which can help in determining new candidate possibilities. I have to say, I find it really interesting looking at these 9 aspects of what recruiters and organizations are looking for in talent assessments. I know when I start to compare extended disc and Finks, there are a lot of ticks beside many of these aspects. I wanted to share a couple of stories with you, though, about a few clients not using assessments in the acquisition stage. And look, I'm sure you'll have similar stories to me as well. So we're just going to have a look at 2 examples here, and they're just out of interest. The 2 stories are the apparently perfect sales candidate and, of course, then one about a frustrated sales manager. So the apparently perfect sales candidate, the candidate, interviewed and talked well. They have a strong character, eloquent, enthusiastic, full of energy. But the assessment tool, and in this case, extended disc, showed to be cautious because the alignment of the position itself with the person. This was to be a new position, out of town location, managed remotely without much supervision or teamwork. And to be honest, when I dug deeper, the processes were not fully developed. In fact, there was many not developed at all. So this person would be expected to also gauge that as well as sell. The extended disc report suggested be careful, added suggested questions to probe, and look carefully at the team fit. Many of the new positions' critical responsibility areas was in this person's high avoidance areas. So in the end, the appointment, long story short, in the end, the appointment was not made. The salesperson did, however, join a rival company, and that rival company is now working their way through frustrating performance management steps and looking likely a dismissal after only 9 months. So that is currently going on. A frustrated sales manager story. Unable to put her finger on an internal potential promotion that her boss was advocating. This is even more common than you think. Sales managers actually can quite easily measure performance through results, but why a particular sales rep is not doing as well is not always that evident. So for example, using either Fink's, I use either of them, but actually in this case, you could use the Fink's sales competency reports, both of them. It covers 18 critical sales aspects. So for those that are not familiar with it, these are not DISC related. These are competencies. So for example, they look at empathy, critical thinking, following a sales process, handling objections, money concepts, for example. It also goes deeper and covers things like mindset attitudes towards the same competencies. In these sales positions, in this particular one, the actually new business development and especially prospecting and qualifying clients was a really important requirement of this particular position. And the new rep, well, the rep knew enough to highlight how important he knew this particular discipline was, but the assessment indicated this was actually a real mind block to this rep at this time. So just to get this right, he was able to talk in the interview about how important new business development was and the fact that he felt comfortable prospecting and qualifying. Well, actually, he didn't use the word comfortable, that he could prospect and qualify clients if needed. But when we ran the assessment, it indicated that this particular area was a real mind block at this time for the rep. The rep would need a lot of deep support and coaching to step up in these areas of the role. He himself afterwards admitted, once we got the data back, that he actually hated the new business side of it, his words, but was really attracted to the relationship part of the position and the freedom and, to be honest, the perks that came with the position. The company was then able to weigh this candidate against others to make a more professional decision. I won't tell you the outcome, but I think you could probably guess. By the way, just out of interest, the boss of the sales manager that was advocating the internal position was the same behavioral style as the person they were advocating for, going for that job. They got on really well. So this is the kind of thing that can happen. And I'm not saying that they are not a fabulous fit and they can't be trained. His report indicated it would take a fairly deep dive of coaching to support him in those areas, because the data that came back with his mindsets and competency was so low in those areas. However, they kept him on and put him into a training program, and they'll reassess again in a year. So it's not that he was written off. It's just that at the time, with the evaluation of how much time the manager had to train him, it wasn't a lot. So they needed someone that could hit the ground running and had all those competencies in line. So, 2 quick stories. What about then knowing your options in extended DISC and Finks? You know, I can't speak for all excellent talent assessment options, but I can certainly speak for Finks and extended DISC. So here's a quick interview of some of what is offered when you need good tools and you need to get it right. We'll have a quick look and overview of the world-renowned DISC behavioural report. Most of you who are using extended DISC will be very familiar with all of these. So the behavioural assessments, okay, these are non-cognitive skills or soft skills and are related to things like motivation, communication, interpersonal skills. Soft skills refer to an individual's or personality or behaviour or attitude rather than their general intelligence as well. Almost all jobs require employees to have soft skills to work well with others and function effectively in the workplace. You know, a clever example of non-cognitive assessment is the extended DISC behavioral assessment. There are many to choose from, and that can suit individual, team, industry. The one I've got on the screen here is the paired report between two people. But for those of you that are familiar, there is a myriad of different behavioural reports, from the standard one right through to even combining a team one, for example, and sales and development and all sorts. So the DISC assessment tools are used to understand what drives people, as well as their strength, development areas, motivates, demotivates, and how best to communicate and retain them, as a quick overview. Obviously, they're far more in depth than that. So keeping in the different FINCS options, the FINCS sales competency assessment is growing exponentially based on ability, predisposition, attitude, level of competence, and the mindsets. These all contribute to the success of a salesperson. So the sales competence assessment combines all these attributes into one report, and they allow recruiters, sales managers to make more reliable talent decisions, decrease staff turnover and recruitment costs, and increase the productivity of their sales force. That's the ultimate outcome. The sales recruitment. It uses the sales competency recruitment assessment during the pre-employment phase to uncover sales inhibitions that are not easily identified in the interview. Gaining an accurate and easy to read percentage match between the candidate and your sales role greatly adds to the selecting of a winning sales force. It takes a little bit of time to do this and get the hang of it, but boy, it's so worth it. You know, insights from the report help hiring managers understand if the respondent is better suited to product or service, where customers have latent or expressed need. Pair the respondent with sales cycle as well as required relationship or sales relationship that suits their skill set. Some sales are simple, others are complex. Some need lengthy, several sales visits with strong presentations, and some don't need much support after the initial sale is made. All this really comes into analysing what you have in front of you and who you are hiring. So, you know, the sales assessment matches the candidate in the required fit. So very much about alignment with sales competency reports. And I use these a lot, and I find them incredibly informative. The last sort of set that I'll go into is the aptitude or cognitive ability. Many of you will know it as reasoning tests as well. So recruiters and HR managers use cognitive ability tests to evaluate a person's current capability level and their ability to learn, solve problems, or process information on the job. Cognitive tests, also called reasoning analysis, aptitude tests, remove unconscious bias from the selection process and support organisations to make reliable hiring decisions. Extensive research has shown that cognitive ability tests are the best predictor of success, as they have the highest correlation to job performance. That's pretty important. Companies commonly use the FINCS cognitive test during the pre-employment process due to its predictive value. Candidates that achieve higher scores are more productive and require less training, resulting in savings of time and costs during the onboarding of that employee. The tests improve retention, decrease training time, and help avoid costly mishires. I have to say, over a period of time, reasoning tests and aptitude tests are becoming so much the norm. You know, just people are expected. And even in my DISC classes, when I ask people about psychometric profiling and what they've been doing and aptitude tests and things, I can pretty much guarantee everyone raises their hands now. So it's now about using the right test and utilising and understanding how to interpret the data well. The last part of this is benchmarking. Analysing candidates against a chosen comparison group generates a comparison at an organisational level or to other candidates across New Zealand or Australia or the globe, and obviously at a global or organisational level, and departmental as well. The purpose of this webinar is actually not to go overboard on the detail today, but I just wanted to give you a quick look because the reasoning test that the Finks reasoning test is now substantially longer than it used to be a little while ago. So for the sake of time, let's just pick out a few measurements, but you can always contact HR Profiling to get the full story. So the Finks reasoning and analysis now measures 9 different areas. It used to just be 5, but you can see here it's got things like abstract logical reasoning, things like spatial reasoning, social reasoning, numeric, verbal, mathematical, word association, visual memory. So just a quick word on this. If you actually are able to select what you would like your candidate to do, which test they would like to do. If you tick all 9, they're going to be there for over like a 2 hours, 2 and a bit hours, I think it is. So we recommend that if you are using this, that between say 3 to 4 is possibly enough, maybe 5, depending on which ones you've chosen. Of course, there's countdown timers and there's forced questions, and that there's a myriad of different things. So I think if you wanted to look into this further, maybe contact HR Profiling and they'll just give you the tips and the lowdown on using the reasoning test now that it has been changed and adapted. So just to end today, we've covered quite a lot, quite quickly, but here's the gist of it. Position critical recruitment or acquisition development doesn't need to rely on just gut guess and behavioural questions that can dig out internal aptitudes. Sophisticated reports don't replace critical face-to-face interviews, but help hone, guide, and pinpoint areas to explore at a deeper level. Mistakes are expensive. Need I say more? Use clever talent management reports that support you, are proven, are tested, reviewed, easy to set up, they're online and succinct in delivery. So for a full review, of course, contact HR Profiling. But, you know, just from my point of view, there are so many great assessments to use now. And don't forget that this is a suite of assessments. You can use at one part of the stage and acquisition, for example, recruitment reports, onboarding, behavioural reports. You can look at in sales, there's the sales hiring. So there's actually like a stage or a process that you can use these in. Or of course, if you're using it for development, then you use them in a different way. But definitely for acquisition, there is quite a lot out there, and it definitely gives you a lot of information in depth to add to the interview and referrals and all the checking stages of selection. So look, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for listening today. And I do hope that a few of you will either start to use more of the different reports that you have access to. And for those of you listening that are not yet ready to, not yet at that stage of using them, I hope this just gives you a few more insights as to the why using them is a really great thing. Okay, so any questions, of course, HR Profiling, happy to do that. But thank you very much for joining me for today, and maybe see you next month.